Welcome to BookTone, the home of wisdom, personal growth, and transformation through powerful words. In today's video, we're diving deep into a life-changing mindset. How educating yourself every single day can help you rise above the noise, unlock your full potential, and stay ahead of 99% of people. Get ready for a journey that can shift your path forever. In a world that is changing faster than ever, where innovation disrupts industries overnight and information doubles at an unprecedented pace, one principle remains timeless and unshakable. Those who commit to learning every single day are the ones who rise, thrive, and stay ahead of 99% of people. Because in a world of passive consumption and momentary distractions, the decision to deliberately educate yourself daily becomes your ultimate competitive advantage, shaping not only your knowledge, but also your mindset, habits, networks, and opportunities. And while formal education may end in classrooms, real education, the type that sharpens your edge and elevates your potential, begins the moment you choose to invest in yourself beyond what is required. For most people stop learning once school ends, thinking the diploma marks the finish line when, in fact, it is merely the launchpad. And the truth is, life rewards those who outlearn, outthink, and outadapt the rest. Because self-education empowers you to break limits, reinvent yourself, solve real-world problems, and stay relevant in any industry, any market, and any economy. Imagine the compound power of learning just one useful idea, skill, or mindset shift every single day over a year. That's 365 insights, tools, or strategies you've absorbed and applied while most remain stagnant. And while others are scrolling endlessly or engaging in gossip, you're upgrading your internal operating system. And this quite consistent input adds up, just like compound interest, making you sharper, faster, wiser, more resilient, and infinitely more valuable. Because knowledge is the new currency. And in a knowledge economy, it is not muscle, age, or origin that determines success, but your ability to think clearly, communicate powerfully, adapt rapidly, and keep learning no matter what. And the beauty of modern life is that access to knowledge has been democratized. There are free books, audiobooks, podcasts, courses, YouTube lectures, and articles on nearly any subject imaginable. And yet, what separates the few who grow from the many who remain stuck is not access, but discipline, the discipline to learn daily, even when no one is watching, even when you're tired, even when progress feels slow. Because greatness isn't built in massive leaps, but in steady, incremental steps. And each time you choose learning over laziness, you widen the gap between where you were yesterday and where most people still are today. And staying ahead doesn't require arrogance. It requires awareness that the world will keep moving with or without you, that technology will evolve, that roles will change, that expectations will shift, and that the only way to protect your future is to future-proof yourself through relentless personal growth. And by educating yourself daily, you begin to think independently, instead of blindly adopting the ideas of others. You develop critical thinking so you can solve problems instead of creating them. You become more creative, so you see possibilities instead of obstacles. And you become more confident, not because you know everything, but because you know you can learn anything. This self-trust, born from consistent self-education, is what empowers you to take bold action when others hesitate, to see opportunities others ignore, and to keep growing when others give up. And one of the greatest secrets of highly successful people, entrepreneurs, athletes, artists, scientists, is that they are students first, always learning, always evolving, always humbling themselves before the unknown. Because learning is not a phase. It is a lifelong mindset, a ritual, a form of self-respect that says, I value myself enough to invest in my future today. And the return on that investment is immeasurable. It gives you freedom, because you become capable of solving your own problems. It gives you leverage, because you can do what others can't. It gives you options, because you're not stuck in one career or path. And it gives you power, not the kind that dominates, but the kind that liberates, elevates, and inspires. And the more you learn, the more connections you see between ideas, the more deeply you understand the world, the more valuable your contributions become, and the more likely it is that others will seek your insight, your leadership, and your impact. And what's most empowering is that no matter where you start, rich or poor, privileged or not, self-education is the great equalizer, the invisible key that opens doors without needing permission, the silent mentor that is always available, always willing to teach, always patient with your pace. And whether you read one page a day, watch a 10-minute TED Talk, or reflect on a life lesson each night, you're planting seeds that will blossom in the seasons to come. And over time, you will notice your conversations becoming deeper, your decisions more intelligent, your confidence more grounded, your habits more intentional, and your outcomes more aligned with your dreams. Because what you feed your mind daily shapes who you become eventually. And as the saying goes, you're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. But more importantly, you're the result of the 5 thoughts you think most often and the 5 ideas you study most deeply. And if those thoughts are rooted in growth, excellence, resilience, and truth, you will inevitably rise even when others fall, because you've built your foundation on knowledge, not noise. And in the age of distraction, the ability to focus on learning is a superpower, because while others numb their discomfort with entertainment, you're turning your discomfort into discipline, and discipline into transformation. And it's not about being perfect or knowing everything, it's about showing up for your growth every day, even when it's inconvenient, even when results are delayed, because you understand that greatness is not an event, it's a process, a habit, a lifestyle. And the ones who win in the long run are those who are willing to do the unseen, unglamorous work of learning daily when no one applauds. And as the weeks pass, the months stack, and the years build, the results become undeniable, you begin to stand out, not because you try to, but because your knowledge speaks louder than your credentials, your clarity cuts through the confusion, your ideas attract attention, your insights solve problems, and your mindset refuses mediocrity. And in that state, you no longer chase success. You embody it, you attract it, and you multiply it. Because by educating yourself every day, you've chosen a different path, a higher standard, a new identity, and that identity carries you forward through uncertainty, change, and challenge, helping you not just survive, but thrive, not just compete, but create, not just follow, but lead, and ultimately, to stay ahead of 99% of people, you don't need to be better than them. You just need to be better than you were yesterday. And the only way to do that is to learn, grow, and stretch every single day with intention, humility, and hunger. Because your mind is the most powerful tool you own. And when you sharpen it daily with learning, there's no limit to how far you can go. And when you make daily learning not just an activity, but your identity, you start to attract everything that once felt out of reach. Not because you suddenly became lucky, but because you became ready, because preparation met opportunity. And success is never random to the person who has studied, practiced, refined, and built themselves in silence. And while others chase trends or shortcuts, you're building substance, depth, and mastery brick by brick, day by day. Because self-education trains you to see patterns others miss, to adapt faster in changing times, to speak with authority instead of opinion, and to solve problems instead of complaining about them. And in a world that rewards creators, thinkers, and innovators, those who study daily position themselves to lead, to influence, and to prosper, not just financially, but mentally, emotionally, and spiritually, because education isn't just about careers or qualifications. It's about becoming the person capable of living the life you dream of, and that transformation only happens through learning, reflecting, and applying ideas over time. And even if you don't see results immediately, the shift is happening invisibly in your thoughts, in your focus, in your attitude, in how you respond to challenges, and in the energy you carry. And one day, the world will notice what you've known all along, that greatness is never loud in the beginning, but it becomes undeniable in the end when built on daily education. And when others ask how you did it, how you became so wise, confident, creative, or successful, you'll smile, not because you found a secret, but because you embraced the discipline they avoided, the growth they postponed, the books they ignored, and the questions they never asked. And you'll realize that in a world full of noise, distraction, and comfort, the person who chooses to learn deliberately every single day is already among the rarest and most powerful kinds of people there are. Because the truth is, no matter your background, your age, or your circumstances, the moment you choose to educate yourself every day, you change your trajectory. And while others waste time waiting for permission, validation, or the right moment, you realize that real power begins with self-directed learning, with reading one more chapter when others scroll endlessly, with listening to a podcast on your walk instead of tuning out, with reflecting on your mistakes instead of repeating them, with asking better questions instead of settling for easy answers, because growth is never random, it's the result of conscious choices made in quiet moments. And it's in those quiet moments that transformation begins, as your mind sharpens, your clarity increases, your confidence deepens, and your awareness expands, not in a dramatic burst, but in subtle, compounding shifts that stack day after day, making you stronger in ways the world may not immediately see. And while they laugh or doubt or dismiss your hunger to learn, a time will come when the gap becomes too wide to ignore, when your discipline has built a foundation they can't replicate overnight, and your habits have created results they wish they had, and your mindset has made you unshakable while they remain reactive, because what most don't realize is that every book you read is another brick in your mental fortress, every course you complete is another tool in your arsenal, every idea you explore becomes another doorway to a higher version of yourself. And every question you ask pushes your mind into new dimensions, where breakthroughs are born not from luck, but from relentless curiosity and deliberate focus. And that's what education really is, not rote memorization or passive consumption, but an active, daily decision to rise, to stretch, to challenge, and to become. And the longer you stay on this path, the more you understand that success, fulfillment, impact, peace, and even joy are all byproducts of growth. And growth is the byproduct of learning. And learning is a habit, not a moment. And while others confuse entertainment with enrichment, you choose to feed your mind with purpose. Because you know that what you put in eventually comes out in your words, your ideas, your reactions, your decisions, your income, and your impact. And you don't wait for school. You become the school, the university of one, driven by purpose, not pressure, by internal hunger, not external grades, and when that switch flips inside of you, when you stop seeing education as a task and start seeing it as a gift, you become unstoppable, not because you're better than anyone, but because you're better than you were yesterday. And that's the only comparison that matters, because the person who reads daily, thinks critically, applies consistently, and reflects deeply is the person who eventually rises above the noise, the chaos, the excuses, and the average. Because while others ask, what if, you ask, how can I? And while others seek distractions, you seek mastery. And while they wait for opportunities, you prepare for them. And when preparation meets opportunity, what others call luck becomes your new normal. Because you designed it that way, one lesson, one insight, one idea at a time, over days, weeks, months, and years. And if you ever doubt your progress, just look back at where you started, at the thoughts you used to think, the habits you used to follow, the fears you used to carry, and you'll realize how far you've come, not because the world changed, but because your mind did. And once your mind expands, it never shrinks back, and your world expands with it. And soon, you'll see that your ability to educate yourself is not just a habit, it's a superpower, a rebellion against mediocrity, a statement that says, I choose to grow when others remain stagnant, I choose to think when others conform, I choose to rise when others retreat. And that choice, repeated daily, is what puts you in the top 1%, not because you were born there, but because you built yourself there, page by page, question by question, day by day. And no one can take that from you, not the economy, not opinions, not even failure. Because once you've trained your mind to learn endlessly, you've trained yourself to adapt endlessly, to overcome endlessly, to evolve endlessly. And in that, you are forever free, forever growing, forever ahead. And as you keep walking this path of daily education, something profound begins to happen within you. Your perspective expands, your confidence becomes internal rather than dependent on circumstances, and your sense of purpose becomes clearer because every day you study, listen, reflect, or explore a new idea. You're moving closer to the version of yourself you were meant to become. And the beauty of it all is that no one has to approve, no one has to clap, and no one has to watch. Because true, education is a private discipline before it becomes a public advantage. And the person who consistently chooses to grow in the dark eventually shines in the light, not through arrogance, but through competence, clarity, and conviction. Because when you educate yourself daily, you begin to build invisible capital, the kind of internal wealth that doesn't show up on a resume but speaks loudly in your tone, your calm in chaos, your solution-driven mindset, your readiness to take action, and your willingness to do what others won't. And you start to realize that most people aren't behind in life because of bad luck, but because of the decisions they repeat, choosing comfort over challenge, entertainment over evolution, excuses over effort, and distraction over discipline, while you, one page, one lesson, one uncomfortable insight at a time, break out of that cycle and create your own lane. And every book you study, every new concept you apply, and every weakness you face becomes fuel for future success. Because while others are busy avoiding discomfort, you've trained your mind to walk into it, knowing that pain sharpens wisdom, that friction builds muscle, that confusion precedes clarity, and that growth only happens when you're willing to stay curious where most settle, to stay humble where most become complacent, and to stay driven where most retreat. And soon you begin to develop a kind of mental speed, seeing connections others don't, solving problems faster, finding meaning where others see randomness. And because you've spent so many hours thinking, learning, and practicing, you now see the game differently, you play differently, and more importantly, you teach differently. Because true learners eventually become leaders, not because of position or title, but because of insight, empathy, and effectiveness, all of which are born through education. And as you grow, you realize this isn't just about money, success, or beating the competition. It's about freedom, the kind of freedom that comes from knowing you can handle whatever life throws at you because your mind is prepared, your thinking is sound, and your habits are sharp. And in that state, you become your own teacher, coach, and guide, constantly upgrading your beliefs, questioning assumptions, and seeking truth over trend. And while most people fear change, you lean into it, because every day you've educated yourself was a day you built adaptability. And adaptability is survival in the 21st century. It's the superpower that allows you to evolve while others resist, to find purpose when others feel lost, and to lead yourself when the path ahead is unclear. And that's when everything begins to accelerate, opportunities find you, people respect you, doors open, not because of luck or privilege, but because you were prepared, you were disciplined, you were consistent when others weren't. And it's in that consistency where your separation is forged. Because 99% of people start with motivation, but end with excuses, while the 1% develop discipline. And discipline builds identity, and identity becomes destiny. And if you educate yourself every day, even for 20 minutes, even with one paragraph, even with one journal reflection, you are feeding that identity, nurturing that future, and building the invisible edge that becomes unmatchable over time. Because while talent is common and inspiration is fleeting, the will to keep learning when it's boring, uncomfortable, or unrewarded is rare. And in that rarity lies power, the power to keep rising when others stall, to keep innovating when others copy, and to keep believing when others doubt. And by the time they notice your growth, it's too late to catch up, because what they see as sudden success was really silent work, private reading, deep thinking, and deliberate action repeated for years. And once you taste the benefits of this lifestyle, this self-led, curiosity-fueled, growth-obsessed way of living, you'll never go back. Because nothing compares to the high of realizing your mind is limitless, your capacity is elastic, and your ability to become anything is no longer fiction but fact, proven to yourself every day through learning. And once you see yourself rise from confusion to clarity, from fear to confidence, from stagnation to momentum, you become addicted to growth. And that addiction replaces toxic habits, weak environments, and dead conversations, because now your standard is too high to accept mediocrity, your vision too clear to be distracted by noise, and your purpose too strong to be hijacked by trends. And even on days when it's hard, when you're tired, when nothing seems to be changing, you remind yourself that growth doesn't need to be loud, that seeds take time to root, and that the compound effect of one learned lesson a day is more powerful than 1,000 good intentions never acted on. And as you educate yourself daily, you begin to lead, not just yourself but others, not by preaching, but by example, by presence, by insight, because your wisdom becomes magnetic, your focus becomes rare, and your mindset becomes something others want to understand, emulate, and align with. And when you realize that you've become the kind of person your younger self dreamed of being, not because of luck, shortcuts, or noise, but because of a quiet, relentless decision to learn something new every day, you'll feel a different kind of pride, one rooted in integrity, not image, in depth, not display, and in truth, not trend. And that's what staying ahead of 99% of people really means. Not just outpacing them in knowledge, but outlasting them in effort, outgrowing them in character, and outshining them in value, not to be better than them, but to be the best for yourself and everyone you'll impact. Because when you educate yourself every day, you don't just change your life, you raise the standard for everyone around you. And that's how true leaders are born, not by titles, but by transformation. And as this transformation deepens, you begin to see that daily education is not just an act of gaining knowledge, it becomes your compass, your mirror, your toolbox, and your anchor. It's how you realign with your highest values when the world tries to pull you into confusion, how you reconnect with purpose when distractions demand your attention, and how you return to discipline when comfort tempts you to stop. Because the more you learn, the more you realize how much there is left to learn. And that humility protects you from arrogance, that wonder keeps your fire alive, and that wisdom only comes to those who seek it day after day, in quiet, consistent ways while the world is busy talking, comparing, scrolling, complaining, and doubting. And through this journey, you develop an unshakable belief in your own ability to evolve, not because life is always kind, but because you've trained yourself to respond instead of react, to rise instead of retreat, to reflect instead of regret. And in those moments when most people freeze, you move forward with clarity, because you've prepared your mind to lead your emotions, to guide your decisions, and to protect your vision. And as the years pass, you realize you've become a different person, not overnight, not in one leap, but through thousands of invisible upgrades that came from the choice to keep learning when it was easier not to. And that's where true strength comes from, not from noise or titles, but from the quiet resilience built through mental mastery. And you understand that staying ahead of 99% of people was never about competition, but about contribution. The more you know, the more you can give, teach, inspire, serve, and solve. And your learning becomes a gift, a responsibility, a form of service to the world around you. Because your mind has become a light in dark spaces, a force in chaotic moments, and a source of calm when others panic. And this is why daily education matters more than anything. Because the world doesn't just need more opinions, it needs more wisdom. It doesn't just need more followers, it needs more leaders. It doesn't just need more noise, it needs more insight, more clarity, more depth. And all of that begins with you, alone, deciding to be a lifelong learner. Because the moment you take ownership of your learning is the moment you take ownership of your life, your growth, your direction, and your destiny. And that is the beginning of freedom, not just from ignorance, but from fear, dependence, and limitation. Because when you know how to learn, you can overcome any setback, shift in any season, and grow in any environment. And that's what makes you unstoppable, not perfection, but progress. Not speed, but consistency. Not applause, but action. Repeated with intention. Because while the world is addicted to results, you've become devoted to the process. And the process is where true mastery is born, forged in late nights, early mornings, silent study, and courageous self-reflection, where your only competitor is your past self, and your only mission is to become more aware, more useful, more capable, and more aligned with the truth of who you can be. And even if no one claps, even if the journey feels lonely, even if others question your path, you continue. Not because it's easy, but because it's right, because it's yours, because it's building something inside you that cannot be faked, borrowed, or bought. Character, wisdom, clarity, courage, depth, and purpose. And those are the invisible currencies of a truly rich life, a life that lasts, inspires, and elevates everything it touches. And once you realize that this journey of daily education is the path to that life, you no longer need motivation, you move from identity, from intention, from vision, because now you know who you are becoming, and nothing matters more than showing up for that person daily, reading, thinking, journaling, listening, applying, failing, learning again, adjusting, and rising again. And in that loop, you find peace, because there's no anxiety when you're evolving, no regret when you're growing, and no jealousy when you're learning, because now you understand that every answer you seek is on the other side of a question you haven't asked yet, a book you haven't read yet, a lesson you haven't reflected on yet, and that awareness keeps you humble, keeps you hungry, and keeps you ahead, not with ego, but with responsibility, because now you know better, and when you know better, you must do better, and that becomes your code, your rhythm, your standard, and your edge, the one thing that sets you apart in a world of noise. That you decided to keep learning when others stopped, to keep going when others settled, and to keep rising when others stayed still. And because of that, you now live in a different world, one built by knowledge, not by luck, one shaped by insight, not by impulse, and one driven by daily learning, not by one-time effort. And once you've committed to this path fully, the path of daily learning, silent building, and intentional growth, you start to realize that the only true success is alignment between who you are and who you are becoming, that the reward of daily education is not just knowledge but liberation, because it frees you from repeating the past, from depending on others to tell you what's possible, and from being stuck in patterns that no longer serve you. And this kind of freedom is rare because it is earned through every choice to learn when it was easier to scroll, to reflect when it was easier to react, to go deeper when it was easier to quit. And soon, you don't even recognize the old version of yourself, the one who doubted, delayed, avoided, or coasted, because your discipline has evolved into identity, your identity into philosophy, and your philosophy into a life of unstoppable momentum. And the people who come across you can feel it, not because you boast, but because you radiate depth, clarity, focus, and purpose, the kind that can't be faked, the kind that only comes from years of feeding your mind with truth, stretching your potential, and mastering the inner game. And while others debate, you decide. While others consume, you create. While others shrink, you expand. Because you no longer wait for the world to give you permission, you give it to yourself. And this is the ultimate lesson of daily education, that the world doesn't change when you complain or conform. It changes when you become wiser, stronger, and more useful than you were yesterday. And to be useful, you must be aware. And to be aware, you must keep learning. And to keep learning, you must love truth more than comfort, vision more than validation, and growth more than ego. And if you can hold on to that every single day, even just for 10 minutes, then you are building a life most people will only dream about, not because you're better, but because you've become more responsible for your own mind, more intentional about your direction, and more committed to the version of you that this world desperately needs. Because a well-educated mind is a weapon against ignorance, a lamp in confusion, and a force in motion, and the truth is, in the 21st century, where information is abundant but attention is rare, the person who learns daily becomes the one others turn to for answers, because they've become the bridge between knowledge and wisdom, between confusion and clarity, and between ordinary and extraordinary. And you begin to understand that to stay ahead of 99% of people, you don't need to race them, compare to them, or even compete with them. You simply need to outgrow who you were yesterday and keep doing it for the rest of your life. And that journey, though lonely at times, is sacred, because in a world trying to make you average, you've chosen to become exceptional, and the price of that choice is high: time, focus, patience, solitude, repetition. But the reward is even greater: self-respect, impact, freedom, legacy, and a mind so sharp, so resilient, and so deeply aligned with its mission that no external event can ever destroy the internal power you've built, because now you've become the kind of person who doesn't just learn for success, you learn for life. And life bends toward those who are prepared, who are present, who are principled, and who keep showing up for their own evolution day after day with no finish line, just a lifelong commitment to becoming more, giving more, and helping others do the same. And in that quiet, daily discipline, you will have discovered what the 99% may never know, that the secret was never in the outcome, it was in who you became while chasing it. And the greatest achievement of all is to wake up every day excited to learn, ready to grow, and free from the limits that once held you back. And as your journey of self-education reaches maturity, you begin to see how everything in your life transforms, not just your thinking or your opportunities, but your identity. Because the act of learning every day doesn't just fill your mind with facts, it reshapes the way you perceive the world, how you carry yourself in conversations, how you respond to failure, how you lead in silence, and how you influence others without even trying. And this influence doesn't come from being the loudest or the flashiest, but from being the most consistent, the most thoughtful, the most prepared, because when you've spent years learning, reflecting, practicing, and refining, you radiate a kind of quiet authority that no degree or title can replicate. And you realize that while others are chasing hacks, you've built a fortress of substance. While they chase shortcuts, you've walked the long road of skill building. And while they wish for change, you've become the change, and it all began with the decision to pick up one book, to listen to one meaningful voice, to journal one honest page, to question one limiting belief, and to do it again tomorrow and the day after that, until it became who you are. Because when learning becomes your way of life, it changes your lens, your energy, and your capacity to impact. And now you speak from experience, not opinion. You solve from depth, not desperation. And you show up from purpose, not pressure. And what used to intimidate you now excites you. What once seemed impossible now feels inevitable. Because your confidence is no longer fake or fragile. It's earned, rooted in hundreds of days of preparation, in thousands of hours of effort, in lessons learned from both success and failure. And at this stage, you begin to attract other learners, other disciplined souls, other builders of inner wealth, and together you form a new kind of tribe, one based on growth, not gossip, on courage, not comfort, on evolution, not ego. And suddenly, your environment supports your education, your routine feeds your potential, and your momentum becomes unstoppable. Because you've now aligned your mind, your habits, your relationships, and your time with a single purpose: becoming the best version of yourself so that you can serve, lead, and uplift others. And that's the secret the 99% never see, that's self. Education is not selfish. It's the most generous thing you can do. Because every time you grow, you bring more light into the world, more solutions to your community, more clarity to your team, and more hope to those silently waiting for an example. And you realize that your real legacy won't be your achievements or accolades, but the knowledge you shared, the inspiration you ignited, and the lives you elevated just by choosing to stay on the path of growth when it would have been easier to quit. And in this way, daily education becomes your meditation, your rebellion, your power, and your peace. Because no matter what the world does outside, you've trained yourself to lead from the inside, to trust your process, and to stay aligned with your deeper calling. And now you know without a doubt that staying ahead of 99% of people isn't about competing, it's about creating, it's about becoming. It's about staying so devoted to your own evolution that comparison becomes irrelevant and excuses. Lose all power because you've experienced what happens when you show up for yourself day after day. You build strength in silence, gain clarity through repetition, find purpose through action, and transform not through magic, but through mastery. And this mastery is not just mental, but emotional, spiritual, and practical. It touches everything you do, how you speak, how you think, how you treat others, and how you carry yourself through storms and victories alike. And the final truth you come to understand is this, that there is no final truth, only deeper layers of discovery waiting for those brave enough to keep learning. And that life is not a test to be passed, but a subject to be studied forever with wonder, with reverence, and with the unshakable belief that as long as you are learning, you are living fully. And as long as you are growing, you are already ahead. If this message resonated with you, remember, knowledge is power only when you use it. Keep learning, keep rising, and never settle. This is BookTone reminding you, you're only one idea away from changing your life. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and ignite someone else's mind today. If you're serious about personal growth, hit that like button, subscribe to BookTone, and turn on the bell icon. Because we drop content that upgrades your mind and your life. Comment below. What's the one habit you've committed to learning every day? Share this video with one person who's ready to rise above average.